You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is April 17th, 2024, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest with us, a returning guest, Mike Ter Maat. He's been busy on the campaign trail as one of the Libertarian Party presidential contenders. So we're thrilled to have him back so he can tell us how things are going. And we're going to talk about a few other topics in the show, too, as well as this it's called Lisa. It's a Libertarian AI, so we're definitely going to have some fun with that. And then maybe we'll talk about a little FISA and the Iran-Israel issues going on. But before we jump into any of those things, let me introduce you to the rest of our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have the Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. In our upper right-hand corner, we have our special guest today, who's worn so many hats, it's incredible. Mike Ter Maat. He's been a policeman. He has also been an economist, and he's done real work as an economist too, and even some engineering training too. So we're just thrilled with that because we have some engineers on this show too. And my name's Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So before we jump into the show, we always start out now with a Liberty quote, and of course it's tax season. So that's a bummer, especially for libertarians. It really gets our ire up. But this is a great quote from Thomas Sowell. So he said, "Elections should be held on April 16th, the day after we pay our income taxes. That is one of the few things that might discourage politicians from being big spenders." And I think he's always looking for incentives, and I think he hit the nail on the head with that incentive. What do you guys think?
I think it's terrific. To be fair, I'm biased toward Thomas Sowell saying anything. In my view, if his lips are moving, he's saying something important.
Hear, hear.
Well, actually, Mike, you and I share that bias because I read so many of this man's book is unbelievable. I probably have about 10 copies of different of his many books that he have written. 10, maybe 12 of them around the house somewhere.
He is America's most important living economist, in my view.
I totally agree. And I like this quote, I really do. And I think we should really move the election data so we could control some of the spending we see in these damn politicians who are supposed to be our leaders. God help us.
We could either have the elections on April 16th, or we could move tax day to the second or the first Monday in November.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes. That's what I was going to say, because the government just, I heard, moved it back, at least for certain locales or something. I don't know. Move it from April 15th. So it might be better to just put it right after tax day, whatever day that is.
Hey, I'm all for making the government wait a little longer for their taxes. I like the November idea better. Well, I guess technically they're collecting some of that during the year.
Really, yeah,
Most of it. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, so that's our regular quote. Now this time we actually have we have a video bonus quote this time, and it's just something that happened recently. And part of the reason it's a video quote is because I'm not sure of everything exactly that the guy said, and I'm not sure we could repeat it all. But here we go. This was from recently a UFC star was named Renato Moicano, and he after he won his fight, he just started praising all kinds of great things about America. And there was one in particular thing I thought was awesome right at the end. James, maybe we could play KOL number 1 so everybody can hear this quote.
Let me tell you something. I am a huge advocate of the First Amendment. First of all, I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and own guns. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, mother.
Renato Moicano, ladies and gentlemen.
That is so badass. Where is he? How do I send a campaign donation to that guy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's something in the water in South America, because apparently he's from Brazil, and of course that's not too far from one of our. Oh, James, maybe you could bring this up, from one of our other favorites down there, Javier Milei. So there must be something in the water right now, praising Austrian economics.
Absolutely, that's where he gets it. We did a video based on Javier's video. You may remember the video where he grabs things off of the whiteboard.
Oh yeah, afuera.
Agencies and says afuera and throw. We did one of those, and we had such success that in a backwards way, I kind of got my feelings hurt, because when we put out a video, when our campaign puts out a video, we get thousands of views, sometimes tens of thousands of views. That's a great day for us, right? We put out a video with no new material, just based on him, right? But we did it with various American government agencies and saying afuera. You get the idea. It's sort of basically the same thing. Well over 1 million views, 1.5 million views that we know of. Okay.
Wow.
So basically what the American public and the Argentine public is saying is, Mike, you're great. We'll watch your stuff. But what we really like is Javier Milei. That's basically what they're saying. So I got the message.
Well, you could run on his coattails for a fuera.
The Afuera party. We got to find this fighter in Brazil. I want that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that guy was pretty awesome. But speaking of awesome, let's talk about how your campaign is going. I want to bring up your campaign pages real quick. So, Jane, maybe you could bring up. You can go find his campaign page at MikeTermaat.com. He also has a page called the goldnewdeal.org.
Right.
And
goldnewdeal.org is easier to spell than MikeTermaat.com, because Termaat is 2 A's. Nobody can spell it right. So goldnewdeal.org is a lot easier. That's where the platform lives.
Awesome. Well, I thought the best way to jump the audience into sort of getting a flavor for what you're all about is we took one of your campaign videos, and it's called, let me see, what was it called again? It was called Stop the Abuse. So let's play that one, and then people can really get a sense of what you're all about. James, can you play that? Oh, so sorry. Did you have some, Mike, or?
No, that's good.
Sorry. Okay, good. James?
This election is not going to be about small things. It's not going to be about some court decision, a particular law, or what to do about some government agency. This election is not going to be about a political candidate. It's not going to be about Donald Trump. It's not going to be about Joe Biden. Nor is this election going to be about me. This election is going to be about you. This election is going to be about your own vision for your own future, and whether that future is going to be driven by your own values or driven by someone else's values. There are people today in control of our government who impose a set of values that are different from yours, different from mine, different from those of most Americans. The values of this political class reflect an interest in power and control. These politicians maintain control by manipulating fear. Political parties have pit American against American, undermining our most cherished relationships, quite literally destroying families. The ever-increasing overreach of government has stripped us of our personhood, our individuality, and far too often, our very purpose. Our once thriving people, our culture, our nation, has been forced into an abusive relationship with a government that has gone absolutely mad with power. I'm Mike Ter Maat. I'm running for president to end the abuse, to build a new relationship between us and our government, to replace the old abusive relationship with what I call a gold new deal. In any abusive relationship, it can be difficult to see the signs. Signs like gaslighting, violence, wasted money, infidelity. Hope is not lost if we forge a relationship with our government that is, once again, based on our own values, to live and let live, to allow our fellow Americans to pursue happiness according to their own standards. It's time to stop fighting with each other and start fighting a political class that takes our money and disrespects our values. It's time for a gold new deal. As president, I will end U.S. involvement in foreign wars and stop sending our money and our young people overseas to fight in wars that profit the elite. A gold new deal means that I will regain our financial freedom by axing government regulation and spending, by dismantling a Federal Reserve system that undermines our standard of living. A gold new deal means that I will reverse the weaponization of our justice system, stop abusive law enforcement practices by demanding accountability, and end a hopelessly counterproductive war on drugs. A gold new deal means that I will put an end to the Orwellian surveillance state that offends our rights, break up the FBI that insults our values, and end the CIA that has caused worldwide embarrassment to us as Americans. I'm Mike Ter Maat, and all I'm asking is for you to stop putting up with the abuse. To learn more, visit goldnewdeal.org.
Here, here. Stop putting up with the abuse. Boy, that should be the Libertarian rallying cry. What do you guys think?
I think it is.
Yeah, I like it. Very good.
Yeah.
I think this is a very well put together video in terms of trying to hit the big issues or hit the challenges that we face as Americans. So my question is to you is, I understand that video and I think it's a great video, but I think the average mom and dad sitting at the kitchen table trying to decide which bills to pay and how they're going to educate their children and all that kind of stuff, what could you tell them that will make them vote for you?
I can tell them that they are subject to a government that is run by people that don't care about them, that don't care about their values. I think it's pretty clear that if you join the Democratic Party some years ago, presumably out of a sense that that's a party that would stand up for your civil liberties, particularly the First Amendment, that would stand up for a sense of classical social liberalism, if you join that party out of a sense that it would stand up for an anti-war message, I think you ought to recognize by now that you and your Democratic Party are going in two profoundly different directions. And I would say the same thing to people who joined the Republican Party, perhaps as I did years ago as a young fiscal conservative. If you join the Republican Party believing that it would stand up for free markets, for example, free trade, a deregulated environment, greater competition among the states in terms of competing for investment, I think at this point you'd have to admit that you and the Republican Party have gone in two profoundly different directions. And the reason for this is because the parties have adopted as their number one agenda is to keep the other side out of power and to remain in power themselves, which is really what it has become all about. And for this reason, both of those parties have merged together, in effect, to take advantage of Americans, take advantage of power, project power around the world, project military hegemony. And at this point, you are subject to a government that promulgates values, policies that are not helping you. They're actually hurting and undermining your family. The government spends too much money, issues too much debt, creates too much inflation, makes it hard for you and your family to make ends meet, takes money from your family and other families and uses it to project a militaristic foreign policy around the world that is not what you would do. It is not aligned with your values. And so I think that it's pretty clear if you were in charge of the government, this is not what you would do. It's not how you would behave. These are not decisions that you would make. And it's time to impose what we view are traditional American values of fiscal conservatism, social liberalism, a policy of engaging with the world in terms of trade, in terms of economics, in terms of investment going back and forth, rather than using our money to knuckle under other governments and forcing people to do what it is that we tell them to do. I think it's time to take back our government and to get rid of this dopey relationship between us and the federal government that's based on money. The government's job is to take your money through the IRS. I don't think that's a very appropriate relationship. I think we should be forcing the government to go to state legislatures for the money, and states ought to be standing up for us rather than just giving in and letting the government at the federal level take whatever it wants from us. And so I think that we need very, very profound changes. As a professional economist, I spend a lot of time talking about capping federal spending and not letting the government borrow so much money and creating so much inflation, because it matters to individual families how much money is taken from you in the form of taxes, how much money is taken from you in the form of inflation. And let's be honest, if you were in charge of the government, you would not be borrowing $1 trillion every, 80 days or so at this point? That's not what you would do. You would not be leaving $34 trillion at this point to your children and grandchildren. That's just not the type of decision making that Americans would make.
Well, I think we're almost at 35 trillion. And I mean, for those of you out who are watching, who
well, it's only 10:30 Eastern time. It might be 36 by the end of our program.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, what that means is that for an individual is it's literally over $100,000 per person here, and per taxpayer, if you really look at only the people paying taxes, you're talking over $200,000. I mean, it's like fantasy land numbers.
It's unbelievable. A family of four, you're going on $500,000 of debt that your family, in effect, has been assigned by your government. These are not the kinds of decisions that you would make if you were in charge. You would not impose that on your neighbors, or you would not impose it on yourself, your kids, your grandchildren. This is not how you would run things. That's how you know that the politicians and the bureaucrats in charge, they have a different set of values than you do.
Well, Mike, how is the? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Leon.
Go ahead. Okay. So, Mike, I don't mean to sound skeptical. Okay, but politicians always talk a good game. They give you all these promises about what they're going to do. All these promises about we're going to cut taxes, we're going to reform the government, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it all sounds real good, honestly. I mean, as a matter of fact, what I hear from you, I have to say I love. It sounds really good. What it is going to make you different, though? Is power going to change you into the average Joe politician who goes to Washington and lose their soul? Well,
I do not have, 3,000 people that I'm bringing to Washington with me, to whom I am beholden, right? I would impose a libertarian-minded administration, which means replacing the heads of these agencies with people who believe in paring them back. If you have an interest in paring back an agency, terminating a number of employees, reassigning the rest, and cutting back the budget, stopping that agency from spending so much money. If this is an interest, then you might qualify to run one of these agencies. And if you do not have such an interest, then my administration would not have an interest in you. The first few weeks of a libertarian administration would be spent doing a couple of different things. One is assigning through executive order, a requirement that federal regulations be subject to the approval of state governors. We would plop squarely in the laps of state governors the right to, in effect, nullify federal regulation and lead their own futures, politically speaking. And in this sense, we want to set up competition among the states to create the best environments possible to attract investment. The other thing that a libertarian administration has to do in the first few weeks is let foreign nations know that we're going to have a profoundly different foreign policy going forward. And the message needs to be delivered more even to our friends than our enemies. Our friends need to be told whatever, speaking of Europe in particular, whatever had been your plan B is now your plan A. Because if plan A was the United States spending all kinds of money to help you so that you don't have to spend so much money on your national defense, that's not going to work anymore. It's not an ethical proposition for us to be taking money from Americans. many of whom are among the least able to afford extra taxes. It's not an ethical proposition to take money from those people and use it to project military power on behalf of the United States around the world, and use it to effectively cut the amount of money that other nations need to spend to defend themselves, particularly in Europe. That's just not an ethical problem. This is not a math problem. This is a values problem. And so those phone calls need to be made right away. You need to call the heads of state in Europe and say, look, this is your 18-month heads up. If you believe that you need to spend 2.5% or 3% or 3.5% of GDP to have the kind of military defense that you want, better start doing it.
I think that first call should be to Ukraine, probably.
Well, that's right.
But James, maybe you could bring this up. One of the things that suspiciously sounded like how you would work this sounded a lot like the way Milei is doing things. Where the very first thing he did is he said, "Look, a lot of these agencies they just really don't have a place here." So he consolidated, brought these things down. So I guess I wanted to ask you: one, is that kind of is he kind of a role model for you? And two, being a president, running for the Libertarian nomination for president at a time, this has got to be unprecedented when there's an example out there of somebody who actually got elected, Javier Milei. What does that do for you? I mean, does that really, is that really a North Star for you?
I would suggest it's probably the other way around. American economists who follow the Austrian school or its descendant, the Chicago school, are really the North Star for Javier. It is terrific. I mean, we're rooting for him. We think it's fantastic. He's obviously got a situation that's a little bit different from the American situation. America is on a path headed toward the place where Argentina is. We hope that we don't get to that level of despair before electing a libertarian-minded administration. The type of dislocation and disruption that he has to impose on that government and therefore on that entire economy and therefore on that society are deeply profound. And he is going to go through a very difficult couple of years before that economy is straightened out. It is true that investors are already applauding, and so that's terrific. He's going to be able to recruit international capital to Argentina in a way that previous administrations in Argentina were completely unable to accomplish. So he's got things going in the right direction. But to be clear, his North Star is really American economic free market thinking that we also want to impose on Washington, that is completely left Washington, D.C. We no longer have a government that even talks like they believe in free markets and capitalism, which is a real loss.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, just curious, so how is the campaign going? This is, obviously it's been a long campaign, and there can be a lot of costs and tolls on a candidate too. So, I mean, do you think things are going positively for you? I know that
Very
this is coming up.
Things have gone very well. Our message has been quite well received. We believe that there's a couple of things that we need to do to improve upon and differentiate us from the way that our national campaigns have gone in the past. Number one, we believe that we need to run an extremely principled platform. That's what we call a Gold New Deal, a brand new relationship between us and government, especially at the federal level. So, of course, when we say a Gold New Deal, we're talking about replacing the New Deal type of entitlement programs that were put together by FDR. We're talking about repealing all those. We're obviously poking a little bit of fun at the Green New Deal of AOC. We're talking about a new relationship between us and government based on free markets, based on individual autonomy. That we believe is absolutely critical to correctly branding our party. We also believe that completely differentiating from Republicans and Democrats is the right strategy to gain the attention of voters and media and big donors. I think people are looking for a very different choice. The second thing that I think that we need to do is to run a very competitively credible campaign, which is to say a professional campaign, a campaign that comes out right away in the summertime, spending a lot of borrowed money with bold messaging that clearly differentiates us, that clearly establishes that we're a very, very different choice, and that runs with a lot of credibility. Everything we do, we back up with a lot of detail, with plans. How are we going to do that? We lean hard into my own personal background in public policy and public service, having been a professional economist, having taught economics, and having worked at the White House as an economist, having had my own business, having been a professional advocate for free markets in Washington, and as a second career in public policy and public service as a police officer for 11 years on the road in South Florida. We lean hard into that because we believe that Americans will expect a threshold of credibility to be cleared for them to pay attention to a campaign. So we are going to compete. We're going to compete hard. This is not going to be a campaign that's based on, delivering a message and hoping someone listens. We're actually out to disrupt the status quo of American politics.
Awesome. One other thing I wanted to ask you too about the campaign, and this would be something that's kind of a unique perspective for any of you people who are candidates and running out there. What could the Libertarian Party do better to assist you? Because we've heard some different ideas. I'm just curious if you had any perspectives on that.
Well, we have to work hand in glove. The party has hundreds, thousands of local candidates whom we will be supporting. And those candidates will be supportive of the national campaign, of the presidential campaign. So we will be working together. That means joint appearances, joint media opportunities. It means cross endorsements, sharing policies, sharing platforms, because we need to make the case. Well, first of all, the presidential campaign has to be responsible for boldly branding the party in a way that we haven't done much of in the past. That's really critical. That's what's going to help the down ballot candidates. And at the same time,
let me break in real quick. To boldly break in to let our public access audience know that we're out of time for the public access segment, but you can catch the rest of this show online. You can catch them at YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, or Rumble. So go check us out there. Catch the rest of this conversation. Find out more about Mike's ideas and this Lisa that he's developed, and some of his thoughts on some other current events we're going to talk about. Back to the show.
Super. So there's a way in which we can operate to benefit down ballot candidates, but their presence is going to help the presidential campaign as well, because it helps us make the case that we're not just a third party, right? We're the third party. It drives me crazy when I hear folks in the media talk about, third party candidates, like there's a bunch of them. No. There's one third party candidate representing the third party, and that will be the Libertarian Party nominee. It'll probably be me, but whether it's me or anybody else, whoever that nominee is, that'll get decided across the Memorial Day weekend, that candidate will be the third party candidate. And we make that point, we drive home that point by illustrating how many, like I say, thousands of local candidates that we have in our party.
What kind of emphasizes that point too is that RFK, in his desire to get on the ballot, tried to get the Libertarian Party as his backers. So that's kind of interesting.
It is, and I think that he has recognized over time, by poking around enough and interfacing with us enough, I think he's realized over time that our philosophy and his are two different things. He's not a libertarian. I would love it if he were. I would love it if everyone were a libertarian, right? But the truth of the matter is he's got quite a ways to go before anyone would accept him as a libertarian. He says some things that are, terrific. He's an anti-war guy most of the time. And then you realize that his platform on foreign policy isn't really based on principle, because when he comes face to face with a military interventionism or a conflict abroad that he likes, then all of a sudden, he's all about participating, and the United States needs to back up Israel come hell or high water, and it's a blank check and whatever it takes, yada, yada, yada. And look, I get it. I love Israel too. I've traveled Israel north, south, east, west, and the Palestinian territory. And I've sent my kids to the Middle East to train and for social events. I get it. I love the area, and I love Israel in particular. But as a matter of principle, we need to be able to say that foreign aid has turned out to be not in our interest. It doesn't buy us any influence. It ties us to other governments' decisions that do not necessarily reflect what we would do. And then we're always imposing our feelings on those other governments. And then they end up making decisions that are not in alignment with what they think that they want to do. Individual nations need to have their own independent foreign policies, and Israel is no different. The relationship between Israel and America is no different either.
So Mike, where, in terms of assisting our friends or allies, where would you draw that line? Because we have some very good relationships throughout the world, Israel being one of them. You just mentioned Israel. All over Europe, we have some very good relationships. Where do you draw the line on assistance?
When it's in our interest. It is not in our interest to project power around the world just for the sake of it. It is not in our interest to take money from fellow Americans and use it to maintain a forward deployment of our armed forces just so that we can dictate how various relationships go. That's just not in our interest. It's as a practical matter, it is a policy that has not worked. It does not make us safer. It does not advance our commercial interests. It does not build relationships that are lasting, that make us safer. We need to allow other nations to fill these gaps in a way that does not necessarily rely on our power and certainly does not rely on our resources.
I have a suggestion also to add to that. I think that's by itself excellent. Is it in our interests? But in addition to that, I would also look and give them the debt to GDP litmus test. So, for example, Israel, with a debt to GDP ratio of 58%, slated to go to 56% in 2 years, and
half of ours.
Yeah, exactly. And ours at 124.5 and scheduled to go much higher. I would also say, not only does it have to be in our best interest, but also you have to have less of a debt to GDP ratio than we do, or else you've got room to spare and we don't. Sorry.
I'll go you one step further. We should be giving foreign aid to nobody. But if you have a lower debt to GDP ratio than we do, you should be sending us money.
That's good.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we'll put it right away to bringing down our debt.
That's exactly right. If debt to GDP is going to be the litmus test, then why don't we have a policy that is just completely socialistic? Everyone should have the same GDP to debt ratio, and anyone who hasn't borrowed enough, they need to catch up and send us the money.
Yeah. Sadly, everybody seems to be racing to the top nowadays.
Yeah, we're all going the same direction. We're just going faster.
Yeah.
No, it's terrible. The nation of Israel, you're right. Their debt to GDP ratio is only half of ours, but their income per GDP, their per capita, rather, GDP per capita, is like 3/4 of ours. This is a relatively wealthy nation. It makes no sense that we would be giving them resources just because they can't take care of business on their own. It just makes no economic sense whatsoever. It makes no sense in terms of values whatsoever.
Yeah.
If it were higher, wouldn't they have a higher income per capita than the United States, not 3/4 of ours? Or did I miss?
They could eventually catch up. I think our GDP per capita is growing slightly faster than theirs is, but there is just no reason why we should be supporting their economy just for the sake of, their lack of wealth or their lack of income. It just, that flies in the face of credulity. This is not, it's not true that this is a poor nation. All that foreign aid is really designed to do is to tie our foreign policies together and hold each other responsible for the decisions that we make, which turns out to be, not necessarily a good idea. It also sends the signal to the rest of the Middle East that Israel is in effect a proxy for the United States foreign policy. And this is not lost on Tehran, obviously. At the moment, I think one could argue that we're at war with Iran. It's just it's a double, what I would call a double proxy war. It's United States proxies versus Iranian proxies, right? And the Iranians are well aware of that. They have been hankering for a war with the United States for 2 generations now. And I think that it's pretty clear that much of Washington, D.C. has been hankering for a fight with Tehran. And
well, let me jump in there, because we're going to talk about Iran and that conflict a little more right at the end of the show. But one of the things I wanted to bring up too was that you can see that these discussions, there's so much deep stuff that goes into libertarian ideas and how government is going to function and all that. And a lot of times that can leave a lot of people kind of confused about what the liberty position is. And Mike, one of the great things that's come out of your campaign, I think, is that you guys put up this AI chat box called Lisa. And so you can actually go there to online and ask a lot of these difficult policy questions to Lisa and find out what Lisa thinks, which I think is a real cool thing. And in case you're not aware of what AI is out there, there was a recent debacle with Gemini, which was Google's AI. And I was actually going to put a little bit of comparison between the two of these chat boxes. But Google, reason we've talked about this on the show, they had a sort of a very woke chat box where you could go there and ask it questions, and it would give you kind of some very interesting answers. Like if you asked to see a picture of George Washington, suddenly George Washington became black.
Right.
It's an interesting idea, but it doesn't really reflect history very well.
Man, Jason, you don't know you didn't know your own history, man. Come on now, come on.
Yeah. But the idea that this chat boxes are all the rage now. Here was a picture of the Pope, which doesn't really reflect history either, and there was a lot of other absurd things. And Gemini has gone and they've tried to clean up their act, but essentially they have a chat box that a lot of people are going to and asking questions to. And so I thought this might be an interesting thing to sort of compare. So this is the Lisa page.
It is interesting, and chatbots are notoriously difficult to control and to program. Ours is in beta phase, of course, and it's gone through a couple of iterations already. But it's a very fun tool. People have really enjoyed using it. It answers questions the way a libertarian would, and so it has been a lot of fun. Your folks can visit it at libertarianintelligence.org. You've got the URL up there. It is something that my campaign has developed. We've enjoyed doing it. It's a tremendous amount of work, but it's an educational process for us too. And I think our attitude is that we as libertarians need to recognize that AI is the future, right? Love it or not, it is absolutely the future. And we need to get good at using it as a tool, both in a communication sense, a political sense, as well as a work tool. The one thing that frightens me about AI is it falling into the wrong hands, and by that I mean our federal government. That's the one organization that I worry about. And I think it's somewhat ironic that the federal government is talking about worrying about various people outside of the federal government getting their hands on it. But I think the federal government of the United States has proven that it is arguably the most dangerous organization on the planet. So I worry more about that than about us using it.
Well, I wanted to give the audience just a little bit of a sense of some of the questions you could ask. So this is, James, maybe you could bring this back up the page real quick, or invisible hand there. You probably look up invisible hand on this too as well, if you're not sure what that means. But anyways, so I questioned it, should we end the drug war? And it says, as a libertarian, I believe that war on drugs has been ineffective and has caused more harm than good. And then it goes on to describe a lot of the problems with the drug war. So pretty straightforward. So I asked Gemini the same question, and Gemini gives a much more nuanced answer. It's sort of like the effectiveness of the drug war is a widely debated topic. And it gives the pros and the cons. So it can leave
nuanced. That's just a non-answer. That's just doping.
Well, if you want to see a non-answer, let's go to the next one. So I asked them about gun control. So let me scroll down to where I asked about gun control. Are gun control laws a restriction on our rights? And Lisa said yes. You get a definite answer. As a libertarian, I believe gun control laws can be seen as a restriction on our rights, and it goes on to describe all the reasons why. So it's a pretty developed answer. So I asked the same question to Gemini.
Yep.
Let me see here. Let me see if here it is. And its answer was, I'm still learning how to answer this question. In the meantime, try a Google search.
Oh my Lord. You need to tell Gemini you should reference Lisa at libertarianintelligence.org, and you could come up with better answers in a hurry, dear Gemini.
Yeah. Well, and even then, there's some oddball topics. One of the topics I've been kind of interested in, let me see if I can find it, was private prisons. That's what I said. Should we have privately operated prisons? And of course, Gemini says absolutely, because privately operated prisons align with libertarian principles of limited government and free market competition. So then what Gemini says is pretty much one of those non-answers again. Let me see if I can find
maybe not.
Yeah, there's a significant debate about private prisons with both potential benefits and drawbacks. And I got to tell you, there is not a debate out there. Every time you look anywhere, they are hammering any idea of taking anything out of the public sector.
Yes,
they want complete control.
Yes,
It's terrible. The reason that I like private sector contracting is because if they screw up, you can fire them, right? Yes. I also believe that, I believe in school choice as a pathway to eventually replacing public schools with private schools altogether. But I also believe that communities ought to have the right and the flexibility to hire either their own police department or a sheriff's office or any other public agency, or a private sector organization if it can demonstrate it has the wherewithal to get the job done in terms of law enforcement. I believe that we need greater competition, greater flexibility. And even in prison management, if a state wants to hire a private company to manage its prison, I think that's a good idea. And if they do a crappy job, then they can fire them and hire another contractor, or they can fire them and replace them with public sector employees. That's what you want. The system that most states have now, if the people do a crappy job, you're stuck with them. Yes. Why is that a better plan?
Yeah. Well, and just remember too, Jeffrey Epstein was suicided in a public prison.
Well, look, the truth of the matter is, this is an interesting example, because which is a greater indictment of the system? That they killed him, which is a distinct possibility, category A, or that they're just too dumb to keep a guy alive on a suicide watch, category B. I mean, there is no good answer here, right?
Exactly.
And the guards were sleeping and everything.
And the guards were sleeping. Some of them was on Amazon buying stuff, whatever. Come on.
So the public organization's response, their defense is, no, we're not evil. We're incompetent. Okay. Why should we therefore trust you? It just makes sense. There is no good answer that they can come up with.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I just think that this really highlights, I want to drive this home for the audience that, the AI is out there and people are getting answers. And what we're seeing is, it can be used to mislead. And so I think it's great that libertarians are getting out there and putting a product out there that maybe they can go for some honest answers.
But it does raise a little slightly. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, I was just saying, the AI bot is holding up pretty well, and it gets bombarded with all kinds of silly questions. Any AI bot, you're eventually going to be able to trick it into saying something dumb. That's just, humans too. You can trick humans into saying something dumb eventually too. So in that sense, it's pretty advanced.
But it does raise. I'm sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
Sometimes you don't even have to trick me. I'll just say dumb.
Sometimes we say dumb things on our own.
Don't boast them. But I just want to make one quick point. I mean, I like Lisa. I like the kind of answers I see, the little I know. But it does raise an interesting issue in the sense that we know Silicon Valley is a bunch of left-wing nuts running the place. Yeah. And if they have like ChatGPT and we saw the disaster of Gemini, just as how Lisa could be influenced, could be programmed to give us the libertarian answers that we all like, those left-wing nuts are also able to program ChatGPT and Gemini and all that stuff to give the left-wing answers.
There's no question about it. There's a socialist intelligence system application, CISA, just around the corner, I bet. I don't know that that's what they would call it. But yeah, to your point, anybody can. But, we need to engage with the world and get our message out. Everyone's got a right to get their message out. It's just that we're the only ones with the right answers.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't think Gemini would agree.
Yeah, I don't think Gemini would say,
I'm not really sure. Ask Gemini. Gemini, are you an idiot? Well, some might say so.
It's a debatable topic.
Or maybe it would just say, yeah, you know what? You're right. I am.
Maybe someday there'll be a Soho forum debate on your AI versus our AI. And
I would love that. I think Lisa and Gemini should have a debate right now. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that would be cool.
That's a good idea right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys want to host a debate with Lisa versus Gemini?
Yeah, we can think about it. I'm not exactly sure how we do it, but we can start thinking about it. Maybe we'll ask Lisa how to do it.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you guys, because I don't know either, but you guys come up with a way. I don't know, maybe, just kind of like you were doing, you ask the same question to both sides, and then you trade answers. You say to Lisa, this is what Gemini said. What do you think of Gemini's answer? And vice versa, and see what they say. That's a good idea.
Yeah, put the veil of ignorance on. We don't know which one is which.
Why did you pick Gemini, by the way? I know you picked Lisa because Mike was coming on your show tonight, but why did you pick Gemini?
Because Gemini had the scandal. We've talked about it before, so we're a little more familiar with it. I personally, I haven't really used any of the others. So.
I really like that idea.
Yeah. I use ChatGPT all the time.
Well, maybe we'll try and figure something out for a future show. That's a good idea. So
I'm going to ask someone on our team if they want to run that. Maybe pick out the debate questions from the last presidential debate. And run that through both bots. Have them trade answers. You get to respond to your opponent. And then go to the next one. I wonder if that would be a fun format.
That could be.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
We
you
did
know
not-
what? We will definitely have to get back to you guys on that because that does sound
Yeah.
like a lot of fun. So, but I did want to hit a few more topics, and I'm not sure if you have time now for Pfizer or not. Did you want to drop that one
Well,
because we are running up close to...
we got a few minutes. Let's go lightning round. We'll
Okay.
we'll do a couple minutes on each topic, and we'll move through quick. How's that sound?
Sure. So let's do a lightning round for FISA. So I did have a video of Thomas Massey talking about it, but I'm just going to drop that because that would take too much time. But essentially, FISA is this issue where they're using it to so that our intelligence agencies can keep track of essentially spying on agents from outside the country. But if they have any connection with American citizens, then it turns out that they've been spying on American citizens right and left too, as well, including one of the most, I guess, public cases was Donald Trump's campaign. It sounds like got caught up in some of that FISA spying. So anyways, it recently came up and Republicans were essentially crying foul for a long time, saying we're going to get rid of this thing. And then here was the vote when it finally came up. Republicans, granted, they wanted in larger numbers to get rid of it, but in the end, I think it was. Let's see, Biggs of Arizona amend number one on agreeing
to the 212 to 212, and Mike Johnson broke the tie.
Yeah, and so they were going to try and get rid of it, or at least try and force them to get warrants for anything that had American citizens in it, and so in the end, even though Republicans were still more against it, they wound up still allowing it to get through when they could have blocked this clearly. So it's sort of like a bipartisan, attempt to say, hey, spying on the American public is okay. And of course, Donald Trump was one of the loudest to yell about it. He just earlier in the week, he had said, kill FISA. It was illegally used against me and many others. But by the time this thing was passing, he said, I told everyone, do what you want. So,
I understand that. Because what he had initially said made sense. To my mind, his statement would have been more powerful. And I realize we're talking about Donald Trump, so take everything with a grain of salt. It would have been more powerful if he had left himself out of it. I realize for the Donald, that's very difficult, right? Because it came off as the reason you should kill it is because it violated my rights, right? As though no one else's rights really matter. Now it matters, right? Now I'm a true believer because it came after my campaign. That's a real shame. And then, of course, he demonstrated that he's not really a man of principle by caving in. I think this is really a sign of our times that something like this could have so much support despite everything that we have learned, and despite the fact that so many people are so upset about this. It's absolutely amazing. The whole 9/11 mentality of convincing voters that you should still be fearful, and that what you really have to fear is not the loss of your civil liberties. What you really have to fear are, foreign actors. That fear is still being leveraged against you in order to consolidate power with the federal government, and in particular with the foreign service and intelligence and quasi-military apparatus. I think it's really an interesting, fascinating sign of our times. And of course, it's horrific and disgusting, and we need to end it. But at the same time, you have to admit, it is absolutely fascinating how rapidly apace our movement toward an authoritarian government continues. I think a lot of people would have thought, surely there's no way our elected representatives would roll over for this kind of crap.
Yeah, it certainly does show this idea too that it's sort of a duopoly on some of these important issues where only the liberty-minded people were really maintained their stripes on this, I guess, and you certainly saw Rand Paul and Thomas Massey out there being some of the strongest condemners of this FISA legislation. In fact, Massey was calling for Johnson to resign over this, who's the Speaker of the House, who wound up casting that deciding vote.
And he should. Good for him.
Yeah. So
well, that's how I feel about everyone who voted with him. You know, not just the Speaker. I think it's terrible.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well,
Indeed.
I tell you that this is a good example of both parties. You know, hey, maybe a libertarian would be better. But this does bring us to our sort of our knucklehead noise patrol, and back to the whole Iran issue with Israel and Gaza. And it was this one is kind of a funny one, because this is a quote that sort of ties. It spans across 4 years. And so Biden, when he was running as a president, had some very terse words for Trump about him thinking that Trump was going to get us into a war with Iran. And so here we have, this is 2020, Joe Biden says Trump is dangerously close to starting a war with Iran. And just so you can hear it, so you understand it, bring in KNP1, James. Maybe you could bring in that video real quick.
6 months ago, here in New York City, I made the case that Donald Trump was dangerously incompetent and incapable of world leadership. President Trump has no strategy here, it seems to me. He has no end game. And here's the hardest truth of all. His constant mistakes and poor decision-making have left us, the United States, with a severely limited slate of options for how to move forward. And most of those options are now bad. He should be immediately reaching out to our European partners and others and send private signals of deterrence and de-escalation to Iran and find a way to avoid the onrush of war. The only way out of this crisis is through diplomacy. Clear-eyed, hard-nosed diplomacy grounded in a strategy that's not about one-off decisions and one-upsmanship. Diplomacy that's designed to de-escalate the crisis, protect our people, and secure our regional interest, including our counter-ISIS campaign. No one wants war, but it's going to take hard work to make sure we don't end up there by accident.
Wow.
So, believe it or not, that's 2020. And almost everything he predicted about Trump.
You know, Joe Biden is one of the few guys involved in public policy in the United States that makes Donald Trump look smart. You know, it's really a shame that he's president of the United States. You know, say what you will about the Donald, because I rarely have anything good to say about Trump or his administration. So, you know, say what you will, it's okay with me. But you have to admit that his administration did an excellent job bringing forth the Abraham Accords, with building relationships among the United States and Israel and Middle East partners in a way that I think a lot of people would have thought virtually impossible only a couple of years earlier. Yeah. You have to admit that was an impressive piece of work. Yeah. And from people that I wouldn't have guessed would have been able to pull it off, you know. So, you know, you got to give credit where it's due. And I think that the Trump administration had some decent instincts. I think that they were just horrific when it came to execution, particularly regarding dealing with domestic politics. I wish that they had succeeded in paring back foreign aid, and I wish they had started closing bases and bringing troops home, because I think that that would have unwound some of the very strange expectations that the world has of American participation.
But hopefully do those closures a little better than Biden did. But I did want to bring up that was part one. Part two is today. Here's what Biden is saying today. So here, Jane, maybe you could bring up the visual real quick here. So that now Iran's foreign minister is accusing the U.S. of giving Israel the green light to attack the Syrian consulate and assassinate their generals there, essentially. Right. And of course, now a lot of leaders in the world are talking about, oh my gosh, we're in a prelude to World War III under Biden. So I mean, it's absolutely nuts. And Jane, maybe you could bring up KNP2. This is Biden today being asked about his situation with Iran.
And do you think an attack on Israel is from Iran, Mr. President?
I don't want to get into secure information, but in my expectations sooner than later.
Mr. President, to Iran in this moment.
Don't.
Are American personnel and assets at risk, Mr. President? Mr. President, are American troops at risk as well?
We are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel. We will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed. Thank you very much.
So there you have it. It just, sit there. Don't. That's his whole foreign policy. But Jane, maybe you can bring up the visual here because this is a meme that's going around here. And so it's sort of a take on the South Park meme. Vote for Biden to avoid World War III, and World War III started.
It's all a matter of timing. You got to get your vote in a hurry before it actually happens. Wow, that was really... whatever the opposite of inspiring is, right? That was depressing. And you have to admit, just as an aside, if set foreign policy aside just for a brief moment, even if you agreed with the guy, even if you thought Joe Biden was the greatest thing since sliced bread, you thought that he was God's most recent gift to foreign policy, all of that would be weird if you thought that. But if you thought that, you would still have to admit that video is hard to watch. Yeah. That video is hard to watch. That guy is the one setting the tone for foreign policy, representing the U.S. government and the U.S. people. Wow. That's bumpy road stuff right there. Look, we don't know. We don't have a way of, this is another problem. We don't have a good way of knowing that the United States government explicitly green-lighted the attack in Syria of the Iranian outpost, right? We don't know that with certainty. The problem is that everyone presumes it, right? Because it's perfectly logical. I mean, how would Israel conduct a foreign policy operation like that without consulting Washington? Washington is between a rock and a hard place. Either they did green light, or our trusted ally is running off the ranch, doing what the hell it wants and dragging us into World War III along with it. Either way, we're in a pickle because of the tight relationship that we have with Israel being one of sharing a militaristic foreign policy rather than a tight relationship being based on commercial interests, being based on private sector engagement. The fact that we share foreign policy and that we back them up with arms means that our foreign policies are inextricably linked. And that's why we're in a proxy war. Yeah.
It's pretty terrible. You guys have any other thoughts before we wrap up the show here?
No, I think this has been very good. I like what I've heard from Mike. So this is very good. Yes.
Well, Mike, I want to bring up your pages one more time so everybody can see them before we leave. So great. Our invisible hand was ahead of me. So there we go. Mike Ter Maat .com. So that's one page you can go to, or the golden the goldnewdeal.org. So right. You have those two pages, and you can find out more about Mike's campaign and how to help him out. Mike, is there any last thoughts you wanted to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Get involved. This is about you. That video said a lot about how we feel about this campaign. It's not about me. It's not about you fellas. It's not about politicians in Washington. It really is about you. And a campaign like this is what it's going to take to impose our values, right, as Americans on Washington. So this is our opportunity. This is our call of duty.
Yeah, I can't think of a better way to end our show, because that so matches with the message we try to leave everybody with every end of every week. That if you're watching this show before the next one, think about how you can do something in your community, how you can further the cause of liberty, some way you can move the ball. We've talked with people who've run for school boards. Here we have somebody who's running for president and generating a libertarian AI chat box to help people out there to understand these these issues of liberty. There's just all kinds of ways that people can get out there and they can help in their community to forward liberty. So try and think about that before the next one, because we need all hands. This is things are looking a little grim right now.
Yeah, get a shovel.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Mike. This has been a great show. And until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.